Charlie Steeds has come up with a new movie, Gods of the Deep, showcasing Lovecraft's work. He has taken inspiration from Lovecraft's work and made his own adaptation revolving around the Cthulhu mythos. Cthulhu mythos goes way back, and Lovecraft is the originator and creator of these cosmic and horror stories. He has created multiple fictional creatures around the concept of deep sea gods. Let us delve into Charlie's adaptation story of Cthulhu mythos and see his perspective on the gods of the deep. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Beneath the Abyss, a Lovecraftian descent into madness. The movie begins with a Pikmin organization trying to join a team of people to go for their research. The Pikmin organization, headed by Dr. Julia, asked the members of this newly formed force to go into the depths of Antarctica. These depths were not yet explored and were about 3,000 meters deep beneath the ocean. She was on the search for a sample that could prove the existence of gods of the deep. She explained to the crew that she had seen something at that depth and wanted to explore it. She also showed the team a solid rock structure beneath the ocean which appeared to be human-made. However, the possibility of a man reaching such depths and creating such a structure was zero. The structure was huge and had a circular boundary. Its opening was supported by huge rocks resembling the size of a house. Dr. Julia was ecstatic upon looking at the footage of this structure. She seemed excited and hopeful upon finally finding what she had been looking for. She was constantly losing out her props sent for research down the ocean. The whole process was constantly at a halt because of their sudden disappearance. It is shown that Dr. Julia was quite persistent and determined to find out the mystery behind that door. At one point, she even goes ahead to mention this structure as a portal to the unknown. The story then progresses to show bits of the past. Dr. Julia wanted talented people for this mission. She goes to Miskatonic University of London, England, and talks to an astrobiologist, Jim. Upon their conversation, it was quite seeming he had known her for some time. Dr. Julia was also quite aware of Jim's father's research projects. She explains to Jim in the entirety the agenda of this mission. She also asked Jim for his presence on this mission. Jim was hesitant at the start. However, he warmed up with the idea later. The scientist in him became a lot curious to know about the mystery behind the portal. Next, we witnessed a lot of people sitting in a room. They were the potential members of this mission. Amongst the crew members were Gordon Atkins, Christine Harris, Joseph, Jim, and Hank O'Connell. They were provided with a high-tech submarine called the Providence 3. The submarine was specifically designed to combat the ocean's forces and its depth. Jed Pikmin, the owner, emphasized the importance of this mission. He also believed in the possibility of finding a living creature in those depths of the ocean. The team members had different opinions regarding the mission. However, everyone was willing to go on this journey for their personal reasons. Everyone was feeling quite wary about it. The members were trained for the whole 2 months for this mission. Pikmin, who had led this mission, also decided to hop on the submarine. Later, we witnessed the whole crew on a boat. The boat sails towards the submarine and everyone gets into it. After a few hours, the submarine boarding the crew reached their allocated destination. Jim was tasked with collecting the samples. As the time approached, Jim started to gear up for his task. Hank once again walked Jim through the whole process. Gordon was driving the submarine, and with the utmost care, he drove it into the portal. However, the portal felt some jerks and switched off the entire submarine for a while. The crew got back in touch with the control panel above. The control panel informed the crew that they were away for a total of 3 hours. However, in the submarine, only a few minutes had passed. They understood that there was a time difference going on between these places. They also came to understand the fact that the portal was active. After entering further into the portal, the crew overlooked a city-like structure. Everyone was in total disbelief of its presence. They then saw a creature lying on the ground. However, everyone was unable to decipher its identity completely. It was something they had never come across. In this instance, Dr. Julia gives an order to Jim. She asks him to rover around this creature and take its tissue sample. The crew assumed the creature was dead. Jim hops onto the rover and successfully collects the sample. However, things turned bad when another creature who was very huge rose up. The submarine was comparatively a lot smaller than these creatures. The huge creature started to emit sounds which created vibrations in the water. The owner, Pickman, lost his insanity in the process. He started to have visions and started to recall that these creatures were the creators of the entire existence. Despite having a hint about the upcoming events, he kept his mom. Apart from Pickman, Dr. Julia was also keeping Mom about a lot of things. Her persistence and selfishness stopped her from acting as a true leader. Despite constant pleas from Gordon to abort the mission, she advocated for the crew to keep going. She was desperate for that sample. Meanwhile, a determined Christine tries to drive the submarine further down, closer to Jim. She was extremely worried about Jim making it back to the submarine. An anxious Christine falls into the pressure dock of the submarine. After getting her back on board, Hank and the crew find her dead. As Jim arrives back on the submarine, he is dumbfounded to see Christine dead. He tries to give her CPR and successfully brings her back to life. Hank was continuously trying to save everyone on board the submarine. Unfortunately, he locks himself up in a corridor brimming with water. Pickman watches him but doesn't make any attempt to unlock the door. It seemed like Pickman had completely lost his sanity at this point. He also looked like a puppet being controlled at points. A desperate Hank dies at Pickman's hands. Gordon drives off the submarine and is able to get it out of the portal. The submarine finally started to ascend towards the ocean's surface. The sample Jim had brought back to the submarine had remnants of life in it. Pickman picks it up and takes it to the lab for testing. Jim and Christine had decided to overlook Pickman in his operations. However, after some time, they were unable to locate him. They reach the lab and watch a tentacle grow out of the sample. Everyone decides to seal this box completely to ward off any potential risks. As Christine went off to close the door of the lab, there was a gooey sample present over the buttons. Christine unfortunately touches it and rubs it off her clothes. Meanwhile, Dr. Julia gets in touch with Joseph and tells him the actuality of the sample. She asks him to get back the sample in all possibilities. A curious Pickman overhears this conversation. He charges to the lab and removes his clothes. He starts to rub the semen off the sample onto himself. Joseph threatens Christine and Jim to not get in his way. Joseph wanted to get richer by giving away this sample. He also tells them of the real intent of Pickman for coming here. He goes into the lab and takes away a part of the sample in a bag. Jim and Christine start to look for Gordon and find a weird Gordon instead. They understood that Gordon was under the influence of the creature. Gordon also tried to brainwash Jim by impersonating his dad. They all end up in fights. Meanwhile, a furious Joseph comes into the situation and shoots at everyone, which kills Gordon. Only one rover was present on the submarine and one crew member could get away. Joe fights with Jim and Christine to hop onto that rover. However, his attempts were rendered unsuccessful as he ended up getting injured. Jim assures Christine of his return and asks her to get onto the rover. Christine was quite resistant to this fact, but hearing Jim's intent to protect Earth's surface from this creature, she agreed. Jim bravely wards off the creature and destroys all the samples. Gordon's body had tentacles coming out of it, and Joseph's body too. Jim tries to shoot at Joseph to kill him, but upon seeing the tentacles, he is astounded. Christine left in the rover, and Jim was left all by himself in that submarine. The movie then progresses to show a scene from 2 days later of the incident. What happened to Cthulhu at the end? Can Cthulhu impregnate the woman? In the last few minutes of the movie, we witness Christine lying on a hospital bed. She wakes up to a nurse talking to her. She panics as she finds herself in a completely different scenario. Dr. Julia was standing behind the nurse. She informs Christine that no one made it out alive. She also tries to condemn Christine for not talking about the mission with anyone. She emphasizes the secrecy of this project. Christine goes into a breakdown and blames Julia for everything. Harris turns furious and blames Christine and her crew for not fulfilling the agenda of the mission. In just a few seconds, Christine cries out loud. The nurse and Julia try to calm her down. Everyone thinks it is because of the sudden shock Christine is behaving that way. However, her stomach starts to rumble and she continues to cry out loud. Amongst all the chaos, her belly tears open and purple tentacles start to come out of it. The blood from her womb splashes all over Julia and she is in complete disbelief. Christine has a flashback of the time she touched the gooey fluid inside the tank. She understands in the moment that she touched evil. As the tentacles keep coming out of her belly, Christine turns awry and starts to laugh maniacally. The movie ends with this scene.
We've just lost communication with Port Lockroy. Something's scrambling our radio.
Is this Cthulhu different? Cthulhu is a fictional godlike creature created by H.P. Lovecraft for his short story called The Call of Cthulhu. He is represented with an octopus-like structure which has tentacles coming out of his face. He initially appeared in the Weird Tales magazine in 1928. He remains in a hibernating slumber in the depths of the Pacific Ocean. The place is described as the sunken city of Early A. Lovecraft's perception of Cthulhu was formed primarily from the stone sculptures of the deity. However, apart from that, another person who paved his perception moderately was Gustav Johansen. He was the sailor who had stumbled upon the city of Early A. He came across a portion of Early A temporarily when it appeared above the sea because of the tremors in 1925. Johansen, in his description of Lovecraft, emphasizes the size of the deity. He described it as huge, almost mountain-like. He described Cthulhu as a loosely assorted structure with fleshy claws, an octopus-like face, tentacles coming out of its face, and a green jelly-like color. August Derleth's description of Cthulhu is actually quite different. He described it as a shape-shifting creature with tentacles coming out of his face and a single eye on his face. Gods of the Deep movie's portrayal of Cthulhu was a bit different from its mythos description. The creature was in hibernation and awoke upon contact with the humans. The creature had eyes on its face and tentacles coming out of its face. He also had flappy wings attached to his hands. He had sharp claws which could kill easily. He didn't move as earlier described in the mythos. He instead stood at a place and flapped his wings. He also made loud noises which sent vibrations in the water which disturbed the humans in the submarine. This showed that its sound frequency was quite higher than what humans are used to. It also had the ability to control the minds of humans. It projected the fears and desire of humans to rope them in. It also didn't want the humans to leave and had an evil tendency. Somehow it was portrayed more as an evil entity than a godly figure. It was quite desperate to reach above the Earth's surface. However, its killing tendencies do remain the same as they match Johansen's description of their horrifying encounter with the Cthulhu.
The gods, aren't they as immeasurable as you recall?
Is it worth watching? There is mixed feedback for this movie revolving around the audience. Some have actually loved it, while others have plainly hated it. Firstly, talking about the good aspects of this movie, the movie is appreciated for doing better than average studio films. The CGI effects are criticized, but Lovecraft fans have also decided to pay not much heed to it. They have applauded Charlie's efforts in portraying Cthulhu bravely. The movie is appreciated for its fantastic twists and turns, which kept the audience gripped throughout. The fans also wanted the movie to be a bit longer so they can enjoy Charlie's story a bit more. The cast and crew were heavily appreciated. The reasons for hating them or loving them are completely justified. Fans feel their acting was spot on and convinced the audience to get strong reactions. It is described as the best Cthulhu movie out there. Fans have opined The Gods of the Deep is the truest rendition of the Lovecraft text. The film is also applauded for its superb ending. It is noted that the ending was the truest and most justifiable thing in the whole movie. Given the interest and love for Lovecraft horror and cosmic stories, Gods of the Deep definitely seems like a must-watch. Marvelous verdict. Gods of the Deep writers and the director have tried to portray a story. The plot is quite interesting. The movie, however, lacked a lot on the budget end. The characters and the setup failed miserably in trying to convince the audience of the story's narration. The movie was sailing fine until the main character of the story, God of the Deep, showed up. He could barely move and just had his hands floating in the air. The movie went on to show the same scene with a stuck submarine near his hands. The submarine was also not really stuck, and his hands were everywhere but on the submarine. The directors could have done a better job in portraying the struggle of the crew members to get away from the deep sea god. There was a lot of chaos, but it was deeply unorganized. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.